Emilia Perez is what happens when Hollywood mistakes a participation trophy for an actual achievement. 13 Oscar nominations. I've seen carnival goldfish with longer life expectancy than this movie's credibility.
That is one big pile of shit.
The movie is a cinematic turd with a tuxedo. They tell you it's groundbreaking, yeah, like jerking off in a museum and calling it an art installation. The dialogues are so bloated, I thought it was auditioning for my 600 Lab Life, the screenplay edition. This movie is what happens when a cartel boss hits a midlife crisis and realizes that the only thing left to launder is their own identity. Now, you've got a cartel boss named Little Hands, which is just fucking embarrassing. That's not a mafia name. That's what your grandma calls you when you can't carry all the groceries. Sounds less like a feared crime boss and more like a guy struggling to open a jar of pickles. But old Manitas doesn't want to keep ruling with an iron fist. Nope. She wants to reinvent herself, start fresh. So in what's gotta be the most expensive midlife crisis since Jeff Bezos bought a spaceship, she fakes her own death, jets off to Bangkok for surgery, and comes back as Emilia Perez. Because when you've built an empire on death and destruction, the only next logical step is a rebrand. And who's our moral tour guide through this legal circus? Rita, an overqualified lawyer using her talents not to fight crime, but to gift wrap it and send it on a tropical vacation. Because why fight for justice when you can just rearrange it for a check? Meanwhile, Emilia's wife and kids get shipped off to Switzerland, because of course they do. Every time someone commits heinous crimes in these movies, they just send the family to a nice, quiet country where the only danger is overpriced fondue. Fast forward, and Emilia's back, now running a non-profit for cartel victims. Yes, you heard that right. The same person who probably created half the victims is now their savior. That's like Jeffrey Dahmer opening a vegan restaurant. And just when you think this train wreck of a redemption arc might work, boom, kidnapping, shootouts, a car crash, and everyone dies. The only thing that transitioned faster than Emilia was the car crash. Too bad she wasn't in a Chinese EV. That thing would have slammed the brakes, steered her back on course, and probably live streamed the whole thing to Beijing. Man, Emilia Perez taught me that staying alive ain't about being smart. It's about how well you can lie. And sitting through this movie, that's some next level survival training. If I had a nickel for every time I thought about walking out, I'd be rich enough to fund the sequel. This movie is not a revolutionary manifesto. It's a relentless and boring 2 hours of smug nihilism. And in the end, Emilia is remembered not as the murderous drug lord she was, but as a symbol of truth and liberation. Because that's how history works in Hollywood. If you screw up enough, people will eventually get tired and call you inspiring. While the movie is as exciting as unbuttered toast, it does ask some serious questions and make some bold statements. First, it's a middle finger to the whole concept of morality. You know, that cute little bedtime story we tell ourselves so we can sleep at night. This flick takes your standard good versus evil nonsense, chews it up, spits it out, and then uses it to grease the gears of a system that was rigged from day one. And here's the kicker: justice. That's not a thing. That's a brand, a marketing gimmick. like customer service or low fat. It's not real. What people really get is whatever they can grab with both hands before someone else does. This film ain't about redemption either. It's about desperation. It's about what happens when the world hands you a big fat screw you and you decide to write a refund policy in blood. Emilia isn't your classic tragic protagonist. She's both the victim and the scam artist. She figures out that the only way to get out of the cage is to make the key yourself, even if you have to carve it out of someone else's spine. We like to pretend that society rewards fairness, that people get second chances, but come on, the only people getting second chances are the ones who can afford a lawyer with a helicopter pad. If Emilia Perez is saying anything, it's this: power isn't real until you take it for yourself. Society spends a whole lot of time training people to sit down and shut up. Women in abusive relationships, accept it. People rotting in prison for crimes they didn't commit, too bad. Billionaires hoarding wealth while you're debating if you can afford both rent and food this month, suck it up. Every so often, someone like Emilia looks at the world, sees the deck stacked against her, and says, fine, I'll burn the whole goddamn casino down. Justice, that's for suckers. She doesn't wait for karma. She robs it at gunpoint, stuffs it in the trunk, and drives off like she just won the apocalypse. This movie asks one simple question: who deserves to win? And the answer is even simpler: whoever is willing to cheat, lie, and gut the competition before they get gutted first. The world isn't a noble chess match. It's a back alley knife fight. And the only people who play fair are the ones bleeding out in the street. Picture this: you walk into a bar and the TV's blasting some politician saying, you're free. But what they really mean is, pick your favorite prison. Doesn't matter if it's a job, a cartel, or a marriage that feels like tax fraud with extra steps. You're still owned by someone. And morality, that's just a bedtime story for people who've never had to dig a shallow grave before sunrise. Women in power, they don't get handed shit. They gotta take it, one broken jaw at a time. And violence, we pretend it shocks us, but let's be real. If a guy gets his skull aerated on live TV, half of us will scroll past it like it's a cat video. And reinvention, that's the biggest scam of all. The world doesn't let you start over. It just decides what kind of villain you get to be. I love how critics are bending over backward to call this genius. Genius? Shakespeare was a genius. Da Vinci was a genius. This is a TikTok influencer's understanding of philosophy, stretched into 2 hours of bullshit. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is modern cinema, where studios kick you in the nuts, hand you a trophy and say, congratulations, you've just experienced art. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go die under mysterious circumstances because apparently that's the only way to escape bad cinema these days.